as usual, we will post it on the webpage within a week or so. Thank you. So good evening, everybody, and welcome again to the work group. Thanks so much for joining us and for giving up your Wednesday evening to be here to discuss this potential historic overlay district. With us tonight, we have a special guest, Supervisor Gross, and one of her staff members, Irvin, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Uriati?
Yes, you got it right.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to pause here and see if Supervisor Gross had any. Uriart, thank you. Thanks.
Pretty.
Supervisor Gross, do you have any opening comments to the work group members?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to assume that everybody can hear me. I think the network has been a little bit fuzzy, but I'm Penny Gross. I'm the Mason District Supervisor, and I want to welcome Holmes Run Acres into the Mason District. That happened in redistricting in early December, and there is no transition time. Once we adopted it, it got approved by the board and also by the Attorney General of Virginia, and so we're there. And so I'm delighted to welcome this portion of Woodburn Precinct to Mason District. I have been briefed by county staff about the historic overlay district effort that Holmes Run Acres has been going through. Certainly, Holmes Run Acres has been, you've been immediately adjacent to the boundaries of Mason District in the past, so it's not like it's a totally strange situation. I think many of you know me. I know you. I know the history. I go by your neighborhood on a fairly regular basis up Gallows Road, and through the community a couple of times. Mid-century modern, it's a lovely community, and I can certainly understand why you would like to have a historic overlay district for Holmes Run Acres. I am still learning about this. Certainly as it comes to the Board of Supervisors, it will be my responsibility to take whatever decisions are made, whatever requests are made, and take it through the Board of Supervisors with a motion to finally create the historic overlay district. But I think I'm getting way ahead of myself here because we're not there yet. But certainly I remember having a brief discussion with Supervisor Linda Smith years ago about this, and then with Supervisor Palchek and her staff. So I'm going to just listen for a while. I do have another meeting at 7 o'clock. An in-person meeting, so I will only stay on the line for about 10 minutes, but my staff is here to observe, and also we will be in constant with county staff, Denise and Laura and so forth, who are really in charge of this effort at the county level. I will close by saying, please don't hesitate to call my office or get in touch with me by email for any county-related issue in Holmes Run Acres. I've already heard from a number of people during the snow, so you know where to find me, and that's fine. I look forward to working with you to achieve the goals of your community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gross. I appreciate it. Grace, I just want to make sure that you saw that there's somebody logged in, MCM?
I assume it stands for Mid-Century Modern.
Then that's nobody in the work group then? Mid-Century Modern Enthusiast, okay. All right, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started with the presentation. The two topics that we're going to be discussing tonight are building heights and the potential of further restrictions on the building heights, and then the front yard coverage that the work group wanted analyzed by staff. So let me get started sharing my screen. Okay.
So we are seeing the notes slide.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Grace.
We practiced this right before the meeting started too.
And I didn't change a thing, and I still got it wrong. Okay.
That's the right one.
Thank you. And I am going to be operating the slideshow, but Grace and Lily are going to be giving the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. And this is what we're going to be talking about. And Lily is going to take it from here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lily, and I'm a planner with the Zoning Administration Division. I know I have been not as active in the discussions in the workgroup meetings unless there had been questions about the zoning ordinance. And some of the questions that have come up in the past meetings were related to how building height is measured and how it's defined in the zoning ordinance, as well as how we measure or calculate the front yard coverage where, parking and any other paving is located within the front yard. So tonight, what I will be doing is providing a brief overview of how height is measured per the zoning ordinance, and also give a very brief overview and an example of how parcel coverage in the front yard is calculated. These two discussions will help us make a determination as to whether additional restrictions and standards will be included in the zoning ordinance versus what will be included in the design guidelines to ensure that any new construction, addition, or additional paving in the front yard, how it will be reviewed to make sure that it's consistent with the proposed HOD. So the building height is defined in the zoning ordinance as the vertical distance to the highest point of the roof for flat roofs, to the deck line of mansard roofs, and to the average height between the eave and the ridge for gable, hip, and gambrel roofs, measured from the curb level if the building is not more than 10 feet from the front lot line or from the grade in all other cases. The existing structures in this neighborhood have a very low pitched gable roof, and so the height will be measured from the grade to the average height between the eave and the ridge of the structure. And mostly the front yard, the front setback in the R3 zoning district, where this neighborhood, the properties in this neighborhood are located, is about 30 feet. So most of the properties will probably be more than 10 feet from the front lot line. So it would be measured from the average grade. In grade, Denise, if we want to go to the next slide. So grade is defined in the zoning ordinance. Grade for a single family detached dwelling is defined in the zoning ordinance as the average ground level adjoining a building at all exterior walls. The topography in this neighborhood for the most part is either upsloping or downsloping, and so when we measure the grade, we have to go around and get the average ground level adjoining the building at all the exterior walls, not just the front. The building height measurement for the dwelling and any addition to the dwelling must use the lower average ground level of either the pre-existing or finished grade elevation that exists or is proposed at the time the building permit is issued for the dwelling. These are some drawings we have in the zoning ordinance that tells you how the height is measured, and in the previous slide you've seen where the grade and where the height would be measured for the different types of roofs. the current maximum building height for the R3 zoning district is 35 feet for single-family dwellings and 60 feet for all other principal structures. If we want to go to the next slide, Denise. Any height limit that is proposed to exceed the 35 feet for single-family dwelling, for example, would require a variance by approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And a variance requires a $910 application fee. And as you may know, the Board of Zoning Appeals would have to make a decision to approve it. The application goes through the public hearing process and is not guaranteed that it would be approved. I'm mentioning this so that we know there were some discussions about, whether we should include additional height limitation in the zoning ordinance for this neighborhood, reducing it maybe to 30 feet or maybe even 25. And so any existing structure that exceeds that height limit already, if we were to reduce it, could potentially be non-conforming. And also any flexibility would be lost if we include additional height limitation from the 35 feet that is existing. In that case, a variance would be required if we were to reduce the height limit. The second option is to defer all review to the ARB by making sure that we include necessary language in the design guidelines that will allow the ARB to make a decision as to whether a proposed addition is compatible in mass and scale to the neighborhood. That would give additional flexibility for applicants, property owners, to be able to make necessary additions to their structure while still meeting the development standards that are already included in the underlying zoning district. This is something staff is reviewing at this time, whether to include additional restrictions in the design guideline, zoning ordinance, or to have the design guidelines recommend what would be compatible, and have the ARB review proposed additions in new construction in terms of whether they meet are consistent and compatible with the existing neighborhood. We have tried to look at the existing height of all the structures in this neighborhood. The information we have is limited. We will continue to look at what is out there. We have reached out to work group members, and we'll keep on reaching out to them and to you guys, and try to get additional information, if you have it, on at least the height limit for the different, maybe the 4 types of models that are found within the neighborhood, to help us determine, what would be the appropriate number in terms of the maximum height that would still allow property owners to make additions and modifications as necessary, while keeping these additions and modifications or even new construction compatible and consistent with the neighborhood. The next slide will go over how we calculate front yard coverage. And I know you probably have questions about both, so we will open it up for discussion at the end once we go through the information we have thus far. Next slide, please. So for purposes of front yard coverage, the definition of a front yard coverage is the area that is between the front property line and the face of the building, and parallel to the front property line. The R3 zoning district is subject to a 30% front yard coverage. So the area that can be paved or surfaced cannot exceed 30% of the front yard. The front yard is different from the front setback, which is 30 feet, a parallel line to the front property line and 30 feet in from the front property line. So the structure may be at that front setback line, or it may be further setback. In this neighborhood, we know that most of the properties are not sited parallel to the front property line. So that distance between the front property line and the face of the building that's closest to the front property line is considered the front yard. And so only 30% of that front yard may be covered. We have done, next slide, please. So this graphic does show you what the front yard is for both corner lots and lots that are not corners. The front yard on corner lots is actually all the area facing both streets that make up the corner. So those properties do have 2 front yards, while interior lots only have 1 front yard. So that whole area that is shaded in gray can only be paved 30% maximum. And this includes any surfaced area that is used for parking in a front yard. This 2 definitions shows you the difference between the front yard and the setback. The setback is the minimum distance a building or structure must be separated from the front lot line and public streets. Again, the maximum front yard coverage in the R3 zoning district is 30%, while the minimum front setback is also 30 feet from the front property line. Next slide, please. Here's an example of a property that has a structure that is not parallel to the front yard. So the way you calculate the front coverage would be to draw a line between that's parallel to the front property line that's shown in the blue hash covered. That's the front setback line. That's the 30-foot front setback line. But in this case, the building is set back farther than the minimum front setback. So all that area, including the front setback, is considered the front yard. And so what you get to pave for driveway or any other surface would be 30% of that whole front yard area, which is shown in the yellow hashtag. Next slide, please. So we did review the existing front yard coverage in the neighborhood, and Grace will go over the methodology of how we did this calculation and what we found out. Grace?
Thanks, Lily, for that great introduction. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, thanks. So the goal for the assessment was to obtain a representative sample of coverage throughout the entire neighborhood across all housing styles and street locations. In order to set up the sampling pool, we first had to determine how many houses were in the neighborhood. We then broke the number down by each of the 4 housing styles and then determined how many housing styles were on each street of the neighborhood. This helped us divide the sampling in such a way that we would get a fair example of each housing style from each street. And Denise, next slide, please. So since we wanted the sampling pool to be representative across all housing types, we determined the percentage of each housing type in the neighborhood. From this percentage, we calculated the number of houses from each style to sample. The number in the right-hand column, this number is in the right-hand column of the chart on the left. And the pie chart on the right visually represents the percentage of each of the housing types that were sampled. And next slide, please, Denise. So I just want to highlight first and foremost that all of these measurements are approximate. This assessment is meant to determine a generalization only. If a property owner wishes to determine their exact front yard coverage, they should enlist the services of a qualified survey professional. So to determine the coverage, as Lily already explained, staff used the JADE GIS measurement tool. This tool is available on the county's website and is open to the public to use. So as Lily stated, we measured the front yard in square feet, then we measured the coverage in square feet, and then using the standard percentage formula, we determined the front yard coverage percentage for that property. And this process was completed for each of the 100 properties that made up our sampling pool. Denise, next slide, please. So before diving into these results, I just want to reiterate these measurements are all approximate. So this slide is showing the results broken down into a few different ways. The chart on the left shows the lowest coverage of an individual property as 0%, meaning the property did not have a driveway at all. The highest coverage was 36.07%. Again, that's fully approximate. And the average of all assessed properties was 14.98%. The chart on the top right shows the average percentages for each of the 4 housing styles. And the chart on the bottom right shows the average percentage for contributing and non-contributing structures as assessed in the National Register listing. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing the breakdown of all of the houses assessed, and the coverage percentage is broken down by 5% increments. The data is shown both in the chart on the left and in the pie chart on the right. As you can see, the highest concentration of properties, 36%, had front yard coverage percentages between 10.01 and 15%. Again, all approximate. And 93 of the houses assessed had front yard coverage percentages that were just beneath the maximum allowable in the zoning ordinance. So with that, Lily and I would like to take any questions about anything we talked about or the process or all that.
Thank you. This is really helpful. I've been reading through the zoning ordinance, and height is one of the harder things to understand. So for anyone who didn't quite get that, I encourage you to go back and watch the presentation. It would take you like 45 minutes at least to get the same material. Some of the members most interested in height limits are not on the call today. So we may want to follow up in further meetings.
We will be available to answer any questions you may have, or the people that are not here today may have. But what I would like to say is that we're looking at both the height and the parcel coverage. The front yard coverage, and how we can get information to help us determine whether we should add additional restriction in the zoning ordinance versus deferring to the design guidelines, as I mentioned earlier. The difficulty for us, especially in getting information on the existing height for the neighborhood, is that most of the building permits that we have either do not call out the height, or in terms of doing a similar analysis that as we have done for the parts of front yard coverage, using our GIS software is very difficult because of how height is measured, that we need to get the average height around the existing structure and then measure to the average height between the eave and the peak of the roof. That is really hard to do in virtually. It may require a survey, but we will keep on looking for additional information. I know Denise has shared some blueprints today with me of the 4 model types, and we're looking at that information, but it still does not have the height limit, and it's not to scale for us to scale it and get the prevalent height for the neighborhood and try to make our case that additional height limitation is required. Once we put this additional height limitation, in addition to being able to provide the justification as to why we need to provide additional height limitation in this neighborhood, which would be different from the underlying zoning district. In addition to that, we will also need to ensure that we are not creating any non-conforming structures that will exceed the proposed height limit. We also want to make sure that there is still some flexibility, given that the topography of the neighborhood is really steep in some cases, and we would still allow for additions and new construction to be allowed in the neighborhood, and do not put additional hardship on any properties. So that's what we will be reviewing as part of our staff report analysis. We will provide you additional information once we're done with our review. We will have the draft language that is going to be proposed to be included in the zoning ordinance as part of the zoning ordinance amendment down the line once our review and research is complete.
Thank you, Lily.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Grace. I know that was a lot of work so I really do appreciate it. And it was a great presentation. And I think it was David who chimed in. It's worth going over that information again and again. Elise has her hand up. Yes, Elise.
Lily, I know that it hasn't been done in the historic overlay districts, but are there any neighborhoods where the building height has been reduced? Because it wasn't in Holland Hills and it wasn't in Centerville when it was redone.
Not that I'm aware of. I know, for example, for the Holland Hills, we are still looking at maybe reducing the height of the 60 feet height limit for principal structures other than single-family residential. That way it will be consistent for all structures, regardless of the type of structure within the district. We may do that for this district as well, if it's established. But I know we're also looking at reducing the maximum height from 35 to lower. Both Holland Hills and this district is primarily built out, so there aren't a lot of vacant buildable lots in these districts. So we do not anticipate getting proposals that are not single-family residential structures. There might be, demolitions and new constructions or additions, and those we still want to the extent possible, keep the flexibility for them to go up to the maximum allowable height of 35 feet, but we might consider reducing the 60 feet for all other structures than detached single-family residences.
Yes, now I remember the 60 feet, and I agree with reducing that. So 35 feet is basically the standard for residential buildings everywhere in the county.
For most residential buildings, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Detached residential.
Right.
The attached might be higher, yes.
Yeah.
Single-family detached dwellings.
Correct.
Samantha?
Yes. I just want to chime in, and I see this tons of work has been done by Lily and Grace. I really appreciate that work. And with this, there is a database that we can look at. I also want to echo the comments on the survey, the building height. In this profession for many years, I don't see how you can get it done without hiring third party to do. It's not only the roof locate the height, spotting that, also the grade, the difference is really make it very difficult to do. I just want to emphasize that part so we all on the same page.
Correct, and that is our concern. We, it's much easier to do the front yard coverage because, we can basically draw a square and try to estimate and guesstimate the square footage. Height is very different. Even when we're using our GIS pictometry, and which allows you to potentially measure height. There's so much trees and landscaping. It's really not. It's the parcel coverage is closer to the exact number than the height would be. So that's why we have a concern about using the same methodology that we use for the front yard. But if we can get the existing heights or what the original design had anticipated in terms of height, we do understand that the low scale and low bulk is one of the character defining features for this neighborhood, and that's what we also want to preserve and protect, but we want to make sure that we can defend it. How we came to that new number, we do need to have the analysis and the nexus as to how we got to that number. That's the issue we're having.
I totally see that because we've been talking about it and we feel about it, but you kind of develop a scientific way to explain it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome. I think there's another hand.
Yes, Sarah, did you have a question?
It's not so much a question, but to put it into context, I live in a one-story Luria, and the distance between the floor and the highest point of the original roof is 12 feet. So by definition of the county on how to measure building heights, it would be even less than that. So I think that's where a lot of us are coming from. 35-foot limit is it's so much taller than the rest of the houses here. It would just stick out like a sore thumb, and it would block all the natural light for the neighbors because the other houses are so small. And if you look at some of the houses that have been expanded, oftentimes the house next door also hinders a similar expansion just to get back their natural light, and then it becomes a domino effect. So I think that's a major concern of ours.
Yeah, we certainly understand that, and we're definitely taking it into consideration. But I think we will maybe one of the information we can get from you is that if for example, your property is, I don't know if it's pretty much flat or if it's um, uh, on a slope, but maybe we can take
Our
a look
our
if
lot is
you,
very flat.
I'm
It's
sorry,
pretty much
it's flat. Okay. So
pretty
maybe
close to flat.
we could take a sampling, but of the different types of structures and lots that are out there. Maybe working with you, the work, we can go out and not again scientifically measure because we're not equipped and we're not we're not professional surveyors to be able to take accurate measurements, but we can still look at a sampling of different types, different models, or different structures, 1-story, 2-story structures, and then I believe there's a 3-story as well. The zoning ordinance does not limit the number of stories; it's just the height limitation that we have. So we can definitely take a look and find a way to come up with a number that both the work group, the larger community, and we also agree is a reasonable height limit. But that's something we will keep on looking at.
Thank you.
Right. So it is. I do want to underscore that this is a study, and we're taking it all into consideration. In any information that you might have as to like conceptual drawings or original drawings, that would be helpful. I did find some information on your webpage, which I shared with Lily, so I found those, but we have not been able to find that information, and it would be difficult for us to actually go out and do those measurements. It's overwhelming, and we're not qualified professionals to really do it. But we do hear your concerns, and I do think that the low profile and the scale is really important to preserving the character of the neighborhood. So we're going to be really taking a look at it. Also keeping in mind that this, whether it's in the zoning ordinance or in the design guidelines, it will be a conversation. Well, not for the zoning ordinance, but no matter what, it will be a conversation for the Architectural Review Board as new construction or new additions come in. Scale is going to be really important, a really important conversation that the Architectural Review Board has with any applicant that's proposing any addition or new construction in this neighborhood if it becomes a historic overlay district. So, of course, if it's in the zoning ordinance, then it is that, period. But unless there's the potential for the variance, but that's not a given. So, Elise, did you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much for everybody's contribution there. Did anybody else have any thoughts? What about the front yard coverage? Okay, Keith has raised his hand.
This is not about front yard coverage, but one
That's
of the things that came up with our discussion among our own committee last week was we do not have a very good understanding that we can explain to others about what happens if the ARB rejects somebody's proposal and they decide to go forward with it anyway. Do they sue the county, or do they just simply repeat their proposal to the next higher level? What happens?
So there's an appeals process, and that if that's something that certainly I can run through that with you, not off the fly, but there is an appeals process, first to the board and then to the court. So it's built into the zoning ordinance. But let me just say this: the ARB works very hard with applicants to get to a yes, and to get to an understanding, a compromise, or a meeting of the minds, so that there really isn't.
Denise,
Yes.
we know that, but we're concerned about developers, deep pocket developers. They are not individuals that you can necessarily reason with. So once it goes from the ARB, what's the next level up in the appeal?
The Board of Supervisors.
So it goes directly from the ARB to the board.
Yes.
And
yes.
if they turned it down, the person could then actually go to the court and say,
there is a court, yes, a court.
Okay, well, this is just information we wanted, so because we're getting asked that question by people.
Yeah, sure. And absolutely. And I think at the very beginning, everybody was provided a copy of the zoning ordinance, which actually has changed. So that's a good point. I'll send out a copy of the new zoning ordinance with the ZMOD revisions. Not a whole lot changed in the ARB and HOD zoning ordinance, but I will send that the revision out, and it outlines the appeals process. Elise has her hand up, and I'm sorry, Elise, if this is if I'm calling on you again.
I do want to say that the ARB deals with developers all the time. A lot of what is built is infill development, and a lot of it is built on spec. Some of it is homeowners with their dream and their vision, but a lot of it is spec. And so we do deal with the big boys. We're not just dealing with moms and pops all the time on the Architecture Review Board.
Thanks, that's good to know.
Yes, thanks, Elise. Well, did anybody have any other thoughts or questions? I know this was a lot of information to take in. Sarah, go ahead.
I was just wondering what the status is of the Holland Hills application for HOD.
Yeah, so that is moving forward. They're advertising the, well, actually, Lily might know a little bit more about this, but they're advertising the public hearing next week. So Lily has been working with Laura on the Holland Hills project as well. So Lily, did you have any?
Yes, so this would also apply to the to this HOD application, the zoning ordinance amendment and the rezoning portion has to be authorized. The plan amendment and the research part has already been authorized with the initial motion that was passed by the district supervisor for both districts. So the authorization for the zoning ordinance amendment and the rezoning part, as well as the public hearing dates, the upcoming public hearing dates for before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors will be, I believe, January 25th.
That's correct.
So
yep.
There is no staff report that's going to be published at this time, but there's a board item, and I'm pretty much sure that it's already posted online. If not, it would be posted soon. And so once it's authorized by the Board of Supervisors on January 25th, the staff report will be finalized and it will be published about, I may be wrong, but about a week before the Planning Commission public hearing date, which is tentatively scheduled for February 23rd.
Yeah, the end of February.
Board, yeah, February 23rd, and the Board of Supervisors public hearing. If the Planning Commission does not defer or continue it to another date, it would be March 8th. I don't want to say the dates are set. It's currently tentatively scheduled for February 23rd and March 8th.
But it is moving forward.
Yeah, and we're finalizing the staff report of this as we speak.
Keith, did you have another question or comment? Or is your hand still up? I'll take that as.
It's still up.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that I know this was a ton of information that we just presented to you, Lily and Grace did, and I know it's a lot to digest. And as Lily said, we are available. You can get in touch with me. I don't know. I think Lily's on the emails, and but you can get in touch with me, and if Lily's not on the emails and you just need to get a message to her, have any further questions, I can certainly forward your email to her and get her connected so you all can have a conversation if you have any further questions. This is definitely her realm, the zoning ordinance. So at least.
Will you be emailing us the PowerPoint presentation?
I can. What I post it on the web page along with the meeting recording.
Okay, so I could download it from there.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. It goes on within a week, no later than a week. Usually it's the next day. As soon as I get the meeting recording, I try to post it up. So. Oh. Okay. Let's see. I have a. Oh, thank you so much. Well, I don't want to end the meeting early if people have any more thoughts, but we could end. I know the next meeting date is, I had it on the PowerPoint. Let me just double check before I incorrectly speak. I think it's February 16th. Yep.
One last question. Sorry,
yes.
Will you guys be publishing the contributing versus non-contributing list?
Yes, ultimately, we're still working through that. There's an awful lot of data to get through for that, but yes, it will be published. Well, okay. We'll also come and present. We talked about having a community meeting in April or May, and at that time we'll be talking about the contributing and non-contributing structures.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sure. So again, the next work group meeting will be in February. The Civic Association has asked for staff to facilitate a poll, as staff did for the Holland Hills HOD, and we're going to be talking about that poll and potential questions at the next work group meeting, as well as Sarah Vonish will be back to talk about the revisions to the design guidelines based on your input at the last set of design guidelines.
I had a question about the zoning ordinance work program. First, I'm glad you mentioned front yard coverage. It sounds much easier to regulate than lots of bulk restrictions. I did notice there was a request from supervisors to look at FAR and total lot coverage in residential districts, but that DPD determined that it might not be feasible to regulate countywide. And I didn't know if you were privy to some of the problems with those metrics and whether even if they might not work on a county-wide level, whether they would be appropriate for Holland Hills or Holmes Run Acres.
And this is information that's in the work program. I'm asking because I'm not very familiar with it. I know we don't currently regulate FAR or parcel coverage, overall parcel coverage of residential in the residential districts. I know other jurisdictions do have parcel coverage and FAR for residential uses, but our zoning ordinance only has, I don't think it has parcel coverage, but it has FAR for commercial and industrial uses, not residential. So I can go back and look at the work program and see why and what was determined, but I'm not aware of it at this point. But I can look into it.
It looks like it was a very old request from like 3 or more years ago, but that it was brought up at a recent presentation to the Board of Supervisors Land Use Committee.
Okay, I can
So
definitely.
the analysis may well have been before your tenure or anyone's tenure even.
Yeah, and I know no changes were included in ZMOD that require parcel coverage or FAR for residential when we transitioned from the old zoning ordinance to ZMOD. But I can definitely look into it and provide you additional information at our next meeting in February. I'll take a note.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. So something that we've discussed in the staff team about the front yard coverage is that it's not something that the county necessarily goes out and what do I want to say? We don't regulate it. It's reported, by citizens' complaints. So, and it's also something that the Architectural Review Board would not necessarily ever see because it doesn't require, driveways don't require building permits. So unless it came in, so Lily, did you have a thought about that?
No, yeah, I was going to add that unless let's say it's a brand new construction, they demoed the structure and they're building a new structure, and as part of that review, the ARB may look at it, or if it ends up triggering a grading plan, then the ARB may look at it. Otherwise, if it's if there's less than 2,500 cubic feet of land disturbance, then it wouldn't trigger a grading plan.
Small area plan.
Yeah, so it may not be reviewed by the ARB at the time it's done, but as any other zoning ordinance requirement, any violation is looked at based on complaints that we receive. The county does not proactively go out and enforce any type of violation at this point without a complaint. It's all complaint driven. So if a property owner ends up paving more than the 30%, but it never triggered any type of permit or review of a grading plan, we may not know about it. The ARB may not know about it unless we get a complaint. So in a neighborhood like this one where everyone is very close knit, we may get a complaint. If someone sees a violation, a very obvious violation, I'm pretty sure we will find out about it. But if there's a complaint, we'll go out and we'll make sure that they, if they exceed the maximum allowable front yard coverage, they may have to reduce it, take it out, and make sure that they meet the zoning ordinance requirements. But I think what Denise was trying to say is that it does not mean it will come to the ARB every time, all the time.
Right, because there's no building permit unless, yes, again, unless it is over 2,500 square feet, and then it's a site plan, and that the ARB does review. So it's just something. It's a nuance that I thought was worth bringing up.
Yes.
All right. I don't see any other hands. I really appreciate your time. And I'm going to let you go and enjoy your evening. Thank you so much, everybody. And we will be back in a month to talk about the design guidelines and start talking about the poll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
you.
care.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Good meeting.
Good night.
Thank you. Nice job, Grace and Lily. Thank you.